Let's take a moment to take stock of how we got here. 3 years of weakness from President Biden. From the very beginning, President Biden appeased Russia, he appeased Iran, he appeased China. He gave Russia one-sided extensions of arms controls treaties. He looked the other way at Russian aggression against America in cyberspace or threats to our friends in Europe. With Iran from the very beginning, he wanted to go back into the failed nuclear deal. He refused to stand up to attacks on American forces throughout the Middle East that Iran was behind. And from the beginning with China, he's begged and pleaded to turn down the temperature which I would say China has been turning up for years. Then, of course, there was the collapse in Afghanistan in the summer of 2021, which put all of our enemies around the world on notice that President Biden was not up to the task of protecting America or aiding our friends. Vladimir Putin began to marshal forces on Ukraine's borders a few weeks later. Then he invaded 2 years ago. For 2 years, President Biden pussyfooted around. He wouldn't give Ukraine the weapons it needed to defend itself when they needed them. And to top it off, here at home, he opened our border entirely to an invasion of over 10 million illegal aliens. So last fall, when President Biden asked for more than $100 billion to try to solve his own failed policies, the Republicans here wanted to take the opportunity to try to force an unwilling president to protect our border, in addition to aiding our friends. So we engaged in several months of negotiations, and after 4 months, we saw that the Democrats are more ideologically invested in open borders than they are a secure border, or for that matter, aiding our friends around the world. Now, I want to commend Senator Lankford from Oklahoma, who led these negotiations. I think he did the very best he could negotiating with stubborn counterparties who are ideologically invested in open borders. There are some good parts of the bill, but unfortunately, the bill itself wouldn't solve the crisis at our border. And we didn't go down this path to pass a bill for its own sake. We wanted to force the hand again of an unwilling president to protect our borders. That's why all but 4 Republican senators and some Democratic senators opposed that legislation. So now we have in front of us a bill that spends $95 billion. Much of that spending, the defense spending, is needful. And I want to commend Senator Collins, who led that part of the negotiations, for doing an outstanding job of improving what President Biden set up in his request for defense spending. If this bill doesn't pass into law, that should be a template for the future and hopeful legislation that might come back to us from the House. However, the bill still includes $19 billion of non-defense spending. Again, I want to commend Senator Collins for reducing that amount from what the administration requested, but that's still $19 billion, almost 20% of this bill. $7.9 billion goes to Ukraine for direct budget support. I believe that we need to be aiding Ukraine with military hardware, ammunition, and shells and tanks. Europe is going to have to do more to pick up direct budget assistance to Ukraine. Up to $9.2 billion goes for humanitarian aid to Ukraine, to Israel, or to other vulnerable populations and communities. We don't know how the administration is going to break that down, so some, even much of that, could go to Gaza. There is no reason for the United States of America to be sending humanitarian aid to Gaza. Israel was targeted with vicious atrocities on October 7th from Gaza by Hamas. And no matter the guardrails in place, when aid goes to Gaza, Hamas doesn't divert it, doesn't steal it, doesn't commandeer it. Hamas and their cronies accept it because Hamas is the governing authority in Gaza. The United States did not send aid to Nazi Germany or Imperial Japan in World War II. We should not be sending it to Gaza during Israel's war for survival. There's another $1.6 billion in aid, mostly to post-Soviet states in Eastern Europe and Central Asia. Maybe some of that is useful spending, but if you look at the administration's own budget requests, they say that that also goes to things like climate change resiliency or green energy investments. Finally, there's $481 million for grants to left-wing globalist NGOs whose main mission is not to secure our border, but to accelerate the flow of illegals into this country. Now, I have an amendment that would strike all of this non-defense spending from the bill, reducing its cost by $19 billion, which is no mean thing when we're spending more than $1 trillion a year than we take in. I'd also point out that even if we didn't just put that money towards deficit reduction, it could also go to, say, 3 Virginia-class submarines for our own military, more than 170 F-35 stealth fighters, or more than 5,000 precision strike missiles. But Senator Schumer won't allow a vote on this amendment or other amendments. Now, I hope when this legislation leaves the Senate and goes to the House of Representatives, in particular, the Speaker of the House can sit down and negotiate directly with President Biden and get the kind of concessions that President Biden must make to address his own failures to secure our border. In that case, we will not only be able to protect our own border, but also help our friends around the world who are in the crosshairs thanks to Joe Biden's failures and his weakness. Madam President, I yield the floor.